Hello and welcome to episode 164 of the Chills of Will podcast. Pleasure today to be joined by Yasmin Ramirez. And a little bit about Yasmin. Yasmin Ramirez is a 2021 Martha's Institute of Creative Writing Author Fellow, as well as a 2020 recipient of the Woody and Gayle Hunt-Aspen Institute Fellowship Award. Her fiction/slash creative nonfiction works have appeared in Cream City Review and Huizache, among others. She is an associate professor of English, creative writing, and Chicanx Literature at El Paso Community College. She stays active in the Borderplex arts community and serves on the advisory board of BorderSenses, a literary nonprofit. Her memoir, Ándale, Prieta, by Lee and Low Books, is now available. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this
Oh,
conversation.
I'm excited to talk to you. Ándale, Prieta is such an incredible read. So like it's got the exclamation points. Like, is it like Ándale, Prieta? Like, you know what I mean? Where's the emotion or where's the stress? Like,
I think, and in the book, it's said three different ways.
okay,
Uh, and each time it's an exclamation point, but kind of there's like "Ándale Prieta," like come on,
okay.
and then there's "Ándale Prieta," like get it, like get to it. So it's like it has that sort
Mm,
of, um, oh my God, I forgot the word in English. I was going to say doble sentido in Spanish, like the double meaning. There we
double
go.
meaning. There you
Yes,
go. Okay, yeah. Or triple meaning, right? Shoot, it's
yes,
like
yeah, exactly.
it. I've very limited Italian skills, but I know prego is like that. Prego is you're welcome. De nada. Prego means everything. Like here you go. Like ya in Espanol, right? Ya could mean
Yes.
like ya. That's listo. Like let's go. There
Yep.
you go. Ándale Prieta. Okay. Um. So like I was talking about before we started recording. There's a tour you got coming up. Like in promotion, etc. Sounds fun and like shout it out. Like where you're gonna be. People will be hearing this probably February 3rd. So tell us what's coming up.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm going to be doing a couple, like a balance of virtual events and in-person events. So
Okay.
the first event I have coming up is actually virtual, with Washington, a branch of Washington Libraries. The
Mm,
link is actually already on my website, and you can access
okay.
it and register. And then I have a couple in-town events here in El Paso at UTEP, ironically, both at UTEP, but different
Ah.
events. And
Okay.
then doing a book club actually towards the end of the month with Las Comadres as well.
Oh, cool. So, it's Yasmin with an S. Is it just yasminramirez.com?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yasminramirez.com. Also, like Instagram is something I probably use the most of, and that's
Hmm.
Yasmin Ramirez Writes. That's my handle.
Okay.
And I have a little link tree in my bio where
Yeah.
everything can be accessed there.
Okay, cool. Any particular like bookstores you would say like, hey, if you're gonna buy it, buy Andale Prieta, like good place to buy it?
So I'm gonna shout out. Oh God, there's so many great books that you just put me in a weird spot. I'm
Oh
all,
no, okay.
oh no.
Okay.
There's a lot of really wonderful bookstores that have my book right now. I'm a big proponent of shopping local
Yeah,
or shopping small business.
yeah.
So I have also some bookstores linked up on. I've showcased them on my social media, and then I have a local bookstore that's linked on my website where they have
Okay.
signed copies.
Oh
So
cool.
I'm not going to say any names, but it's all over the place.
Yeah.
That
Right.
way I don't get in trouble for
Don't play any
missing one.
favorites. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, people who are listening, like, what are you doing? Like, pause it for a minute, go to yasminramirez.com, buy the book, check out the tour. We'll be waiting when you come back, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I'd love to start to talk about the beginnings. Like, in the book, you talk about like, the rebellious phase a lot of us had, like 13, 14-ish, right? Where, you weren't always maybe doing the right thing, but you were reading like crazy, it sounds like. So like then or even earlier, like what were you reading? Like what was your relationship with the written word? It's a lot here. And then I know Spanglish, Spanish, English, you spoke all the above. Like did you learn was English your first language? Was it concurrent with Spanish? Like how did that work? It's a lot, sorry.
I'll start. Oh yeah. Hold on. I'll start with the reading. I think as much as I was being like rebellious and doing all these things, reading was an escape for me pre those ages. So even like middle school, before all the
Yeah.
hormones hit, I was super into reading. And my mom, thankfully, was very supportive of that habit. And so she would buy me books. My sister would take me to the library. And I read a lot of like what was popular at that time in like 80s
Mm.
series. So like I started with like the Babysitter's
Oh
Club,
yeah.
and then I read like Sweet Valley High. And then I went into this big horror phase where I was reading like R.L. Stein,
Mm.
and then I started reading Anne Rice. That
Okay.
gets me to like the rebellious stage.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then I just like religiously read all her books, even the ones not about the vampires. And um I just consumed books at a high rate. And so like my sister, who is 10 years older than me, was giving me adult books to read when I was like a freshman in high school
yeah.
already, just because I was going through books so quickly.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was just a nice place to be, right? When you don't like anyone, the best place to be is in your mind. And I had like mental movies just going all the time with the books. So
Dang, that's deep.
that
I
was
like that.
great.
Nice.
Yeah.
So like I mean, were there some writers or writing that like made you just like see the world differently, like, and also see yourself? I know you got into writing not late, but a little bit later maybe than some. Like, was there a book or books or series or writers where you're just like, man, I can do this, or like amazed by how well somebody does it?
I think, that's hard because I do this thing when I read that I get really like crazy about one book and I'm like, this is amazing, and I won't stop talking
Mm,
about it. And then I'll
same.
get to the next book that does that to me, and I'll be like, this is amazing. And so I think on my young little mind, when because I had journals all growing up.
Mm.
I had tons of journals. I still have them like in a little
The
box,
black
like
and
one
white
of those
cover, the black and white like pebbled cover.
the composition. I have one
Yeah.
of those,
Oh yeah.
and then I have like I just like to collect journals also. So I have all these random ones. But
Mm.
so I think when I first started trying to write, and I was a baby writer who was afraid to show anything to anyone,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And we're like, no,
Mm.
I think was when I was reading Anne Rice, honestly, because I was just kind of amazed on how she would describe things. And I don't know if I go back now if I'm going to feel the same way, but
Sure.
at that age I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think just some of her ideas, how she played, like one of my favorite books actually is one of the later ones, Memoir the Devil, where she's playing with like religion.
Mm.
And that was really like, what, how is this
Yeah,
possible? Because I
yeah.
was raised so Catholic
Right.
that part of me was like, this is sacrilegious. And then the other part was like, this is amazing.
Mm.
um, so it was like a little secret that I kept because like my mom was suspicious of that book. I don't know if she read the cover, and she was like trying to wait to get it for me. And then I bought it myself.
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, okay, well, too late.
Well, you talked. It was amazing to me. Like, I mean, the more and more I've talked to people, especially from Texas, I get it. I get it from California too, where like I'm in Sacramento and people are like, "Do you know LA?" I do because I live there, but LA is 6, 7 hours away, right? My point is like you were talking about when you're living in Dallas. Some of the people in Dallas were like, "El Paso, where's that?" Right? So I
Yes,
guess
12 hours away. 12
dang,
hours.
I mean, Texas is huge, right? But I guess
Huge.
my point is just like, I mean, obviously like the borderlands, and then even there's like what Rio Grande Valley, which I guess would not be El Paso, right? I mean, there's so many different areas of Texas, and then the borderlands of any place, there's always a different cultures. So I just wonder, like, did you feel like represented in all the different, subcultures, cultures that make you up? Like, did you feel represented in what you read?
I don't, that never occurred to me until later when I was in college. The first book I actually read where I saw Spanglish was Dagoberto Gilb's Gritos.
Okay.
And at first, I have to admit, I did not like it because I was like,
Mm,
what is this?
yeah.
I didn't understand it. And I think I was in college at the time. I don't know how old I was, but I didn't understand what he was doing. And I was like, the Spanish is kind of forced. Why is he doing this?
Mm,
And then it wasn't until later that I started thinking like, oh, wait a minute. I don't see any people like me in the books that I've read. Um, and I think I'm gonna like there's a TED Talk that I love, a danger of a single story.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And she talks about how she would write about snow and apples
Yeah.
and things and ginger beer. And I and I think that's
Coming
exactly
from
where
what,
I was.
Nigeria, I want to say, right?
Yes,
She's like, it
yeah.
doesn't snow in Nigeria. Like what? Yeah.
Because she was reading books by like British authors.
Hmm.
And I kind of had that same thing in that I didn't think that I could write about my life or about where I came from or the border or anything like that because I'd never seen it in a book. And even later, as I started reading more and I started reading books by more people of color, I realized I didn't also necessarily resonate with like immigrant stories or first generation stories.
Hmm.
So I also felt a disconnect to some of those narratives, and I found myself gravitating more towards like Cuban literature or like
Hmm.
Dominican literature because there was in that first gen narrative that we see a lot in Chicano literature.
Hmm.
Um, so it was weird. Like I'm like, this is yeah, I get it, but I've never had this experience.
Yeah.
And so um but then I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily needed permission, but it was interesting seeing what people were doing with language. And I was fascinated by that. And then, there's a famous Junot Diaz quote where he talks about people spend forever learning like Elfish or something for Lord of the
Oh,
Rings, but
yes,
they
yes,
can't
yes.
they can't learn Spanish or
Right.
they get upset about one line. And I think maybe that little inner like 13-year-old rebellion person was like, yeah, let's put Spanish because we want to. um,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I gave you a really long answer. I'm
No, no, I
sorry.
appreciate that. No, a lot of touched on a lot of things. That's really interesting. You, you know, I think so. I'll be 43 in about a week and a half. So I think we're kind of around the same age. So the Nirvana was really sticking out to me because so I don't know. Growing up around, you had to be a rapper or a rocker. You couldn't be both. If you were,
Yeah,
you
you
were you were
couldn't.
a poser. Remember to be a
That's it. Yeah.
right to be a poser was just right. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah. It
I
was a
I've
big
always
insult.
right. I've always been into both big time. I'll listen to Sinatra to Dr. Dre to Bone Thugs and Harmony to Tool or whatever. But I love Nirvana. So tell me about some Nirvana. Was it more like the aesthetic, that you were into, or were you really into their music?
I was really into their music. The aesthetic didn't hurt by any means, but yeah, I was super just I remember, first hearing that I think ever like anyone who grew up in that time period, they have like I remember when I first heard Nirvana that you're just
Hmm.
kind of like, and then now in retrospect, we look like as soon as they came out, it was like the death of like hair metal, right? It just
Mm.
like, and
Mm.
so I don't know. I grew up listening to a ton of music, and then when I finally got to pick my own music, I just went to Nirvana and I listened to their album. The only one I didn't love too much was Bleach because it was
Okay.
just really it was
Yeah.
rough.
It was rough.
Um,
Right. Right.
but even like Incesticide, where people weren't that excited about that one, I'd listen to that one. I just
Mm.
really loved their albums. And then of course the last Unplugged was
Oof.
yeah. I mean, I have it on vinyl and it's
Oh
still
wow.
amazing to this day. So I think the music just really spoke to this generation of angsty kids who were
Mm.
left home alone a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I'll go back every I don't know 6 7 months. Not like it's a scheduled thing, but like I'll go back and watch the video for Where Did You Sleep Last Night when he does that. Everyone kind of talks about
Mhm.
like that was like a unfortunately like a preview of like of his depression of his all that, but just like I'm talking about when he takes that deep breath. Where did you sleep last night?
Yes.
And towards the end, some about anyways. So I was really interested in that. And then we can talk maybe later about how the music is maybe how music affects your writing even. But so like as you got older into college and into grad school, which there was a separation between college, right, and grad school, but who really just thrills present tense, like who are you even as a professor, like who are you teaching but
Oh,
also loving? Oh,
wait,
is that
music
again?
or do you,
Is that
wait,
sorry?
are you
Is that another interminable list? Maybe I'm talking
yeah, I
writers.
think
Sorry, I'm talking
oh,
writers now.
writer. Okay, oh, writers. Well, I was
Yeah.
like, wait, are we still talking about music?
Yeah.
I mean, it's equally. You know what I do? I rotate a lot on who I'm teaching because I find that, and I'll go back to some. So
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, so in like my Chicano literature class, I was teaching Jose Olivares,
Okay.
Citizen Illegal, because I really loved that. And then I was teaching Luis Alberto Urrea's Nobody's Son, which was beautiful.
Oh yeah.
And then last semester, I switched it out and I was doing Maria Hinojosas.
Mm.
Heard the title just slipped my mind. Once I Was You, like I
Yeah,
have it
yeah,
right
yeah.
there.
From
And
NPR,
then
from what's the name of her show? NPR
uh,
Latino USA.
yes, Latino USA.
Okay.
And then I was teaching an anthology of poetry that was like Jose Olivares was also involved with the
Mm.
Latinx anthology. That was pretty
Ah.
cool. Right now, and that's in my Chicano Lit class. So in my like literature courses, I try to offer a little bit of everything. So, like I have Black Flamingo
Hmm.
by and I'm so bad with names. I was looking up names actually
That's
right before Black Flamingo. It's a beautiful LGBTQ plus story of a boy who's been growing up in England, but he's biracial, like he's half black, half Greek, or half Jamaican, half Greek.
Mm.
And it's written in verse. So
Oh
it's
wow.
really lovely. Juliet Takes a Breath. I'm teaching that one too.
Okay.
And when I say teach, I put students in groups and they read a novel. And that way they each read, there's about 10 novels in the
Uh,
class and they're all grouped. So I'm teaching different groups at the same time.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So it's Dean Ada.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you're, I mean, you're open to. I love it. You're open to change. I mean, you're not teaching like the canon, like no matter what, every year, again and again. Like you're.
No, no, no. I
Yeah.
like mixing it up. And I like
Yeah.
also just introducing my students. Like those two books that I mentioned, I have a longer list. I could just go
Mhm.
on. But I like to put in YA because I feel like students have been taught this antiquated canon that they
Mm.
cannot relate to. And so they get this impression, and
Preach.
that's how they start saying, like,
Preach.
I don't read, I don't like to read. And I'm like,
Mm.
do you realize that's like saying I don't like to eat? Like,
Thank
you
you.
read
Thank you.
everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I have more modern works on there, and I try to pick stuff that I think they would relate to. And I give them a list of choices, and I let them pick which one they want from that list. That way, at least they're going to read something that I hope they will enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I like to rotate that list a lot. I read a ton. And so I'm always like, oh, I think this one and this one. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of
Mm.
fun for me.
Yeah, I bet. So your book is a memoir. Are there particular memoirists who you really were inspired by, who you really enjoy their work?
Yes. In fact, I sort of had like a giant fangirl moment because on the
Hmm.
cover of my book, there's Sonia Livingston. She wrote Ghost Bread, and she
Okay.
blurbed my book, and I read her book when
Nice.
I was writing mine.
Yeah.
So it sort of came full circle for me.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy her writing. And then someone else I was reading at that time was Nick Flynn,
Okay.
Another Bullshit Night in Stuck City.
That's a great
And
title. Great title.
yes, he plays with form in his memoir a lot. And I think that sort of inspired me to play with some of like the recipe that I have in it, or even the way I kind of did listing. He did this beautiful like faux interview with his father
Mm,
in the memoir. Like
mm,
if this is the conversation I would have had with him, but he's interviewing him.
uh,
And so I found like that so interesting because I think even though it's a memoir, I myself imagined what it would be like to have a conversation with like my grandma or with
yeah.
my dad or and even though it's not real, it's still imagined conversations I've had in my mind. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Mm,
I can play with this idea. Um, and this is not a memoir, but or no, it is. Joy Castro. Uh,
oh yeah.
I, yeah. And so that one was a lot of fun just because of the language and culture that was weaved into it. So
Yeah.
that also, I was like, okay, this is like it's culturally adjacent,
Okay.
but I was like, oh wait, she did this, I can do this.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think those are the top ones
yeah.
um that I can think of. Like these are the ones that really influenced me.
Mm-hmm. I just had a guest 3 or 4 episodes ago who definitely shouted out Joy Castro, so that's cool. Cool to hear. Um, so the full title is Ándale, Prieta, a love letter to my family. I wonder, I guess in the end of the book, you kind of learn about the seeds for the book, but like, yeah, I'd love to know about the seeds for the book. Like, what made you say, like, I need to write this, or I want to write this?
I think the book, and this sounds like a cliche answer, but I think the book wanted to be written and it just kind of dragged me
The
along the
book had
way.
agency. Yes.
It did, because it
Mm.
even decided like when it was going to get published, because it was supposed to be published like 2 years ago and then
Uh-huh.
COVID hit. It had another cover and then it ended up getting this cover,
Mm.
which is, they're both beautiful, but this one just hits home a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, it didn't even go with the original publisher. So
Ah.
it has a mind of its own. It just decided like this is what I want. And I'm very superstitious, so I feel like that my IPA had like a hand in it. Like, no, not yet, not yet, not yet.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it just did what it wanted. And it started with just short stories when I was like just mourning her death and trying to hang on to memories I had of her. And it just like grew and grew and grew from there.
Well, so that was so cool. I ended up going on a little Google search of I want to say Dr. Abarca, right? So you like food and writing, basically food and cultural writing, that kind of thing. Is one of the classes that you took, and you talked about like. So I want to know about this story that you wrote that like the class got impressed by. It was about, it wasn't about food. It's not like about your Ita, about like her makeup routine, kind of like.
Yes, yeah. It was funny because I'd been turning in stuff that I thought was writerly, and my workshops had just been really bad up until that point. And so I was definitely feeling like, whoa, did I make a right decision by coming home and doing this? Because
Yeah.
this is rough. And for whatever reason, I wasn't prepared. Like I didn't do homework. I don't know what, but I took the piece actually, I think it closes the part one where I'm watching her take her makeup off. Um, is it? I think so. Yeah, it's part one
Mm-hmm.
where it's like she's polishing her face. And I remember my professor and now good friend Lex Williford was like going on and on about the calzones, like, and the calzones are so beautiful.
Oh, that
And
was
then
the makeup one. Yeah.
yeah, where it's like the men's underwear. But it was funny because Lex is white and he knows some Spanish, but when he was going on like the calzones are beautiful, I was like, does he know what calzones are? And
Yeah.
he just found like it was a very um human moment where I wasn't trying to write like I thought a writer should write. It was, this is how it happened. And
Yeah.
um that's when I was kind of like blown away because I was like, oh wait, I can sound like myself. I can write the way I want to write. And
Mm.
it's okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was so impressed about with the book is your masterful touch with like the point of view like of a child. Like watching her cook, watching her do, watching her at the bar, watching, and then it's as it traces your life. But like I know I know from experience, it's really hard to get that point of view of the child without like not dumbing it down, but you know what I mean, with that, like making it like authentic. So that was really impressive. Chapter one ends. Well, I'm a huge fan of like the forgetting the Latin term. There's a Latin term for like starting in the middle. And so your chapter one starts with you working, describing your time working at like Nordstrom's and these clothing places. And chapter one ends with, I didn't tell them I never got a chance to fit Ita. And that was so powerful because it was talking about how you helped those who had breast cancer and lost a breast, prosthetics and stuff like that. And I just was so like blown away by that last line. It was an ending of a chapter, but it was a beginning, it was a middle, it was all of that. I didn't tell them that I never got a chance to fit Ita. Just it's almost like foreshadowing too, for the rest of the book. I love to talk about the meaning of Prieta, the
Sure.
meanings. Um,
Meanings, yes, there's
right?
multiple.
Yeah, so it sounded like it especially came out like when you were getting taught to box and defend yourself, right, at school and that kind of thing. Your Ita was she could handle herself with a fist. But so like I wonder about Prieta.
You know, it's hard because Prieta, for me, it means one thing, and then in the outside world, it can mean something else. And so the core of the book, and I try to address that a little bit, but since most of my experiences were not negative with the term Prieta, that's why it's even like the title is, I got really excited by it. I felt like my grandma and I were both
Mm.
represented in the
Yeah,
title,
yeah, yeah.
right? Since she's the one that's telling me Ándale Prieta in certain points in the book. And so, Prieta at its core just means like dark one or darker one. Like I'm Prietita. I'm extra Prietita right now because I spent the holidays at a beach.
Nice.
So, but I didn't grow up feeling odd about my skin. That didn't come until later, and actually from like classmates where I was like, oh, wait, I'm darker. Yeah, okay.
Mm.
And that was an odd thing for me to feel completely normal at home. And then for my skin color to be pointed out, like at
Mm.
school, by other kids that were also like Mexican American. And I'm like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, why are you doing that? Right. As a
Oh,
kid, I was very confused by it.
yeah.
And then as I got older and then living in Dallas, I definitely felt my skin color a lot. And so I always went back to I'm Prieta, like my grandma's version of Prieta,
Hmm.
that I was okay. Like she never told me to stay out of the sun,
Yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
that you'll hear from other people in the Latina community. And that's where the negative term comes in, right? Because some people use it as like, "Ooh, you're so prieta,
Okay.
bien prieta." I noticed the negative comes when you add like the bien, like you're
Ah,
very dark.
okay.
Um, and so it's complicated, but for me, it's like a word that I cherish
Yeah.
so much.
Mm.
And that I'm so glad that my Ita sort of instilled that in me, and there was never anything negative about my skin color with my family.
Hmm. Well, you described like, spending a lot of time with her, when your mom was working really hard, working two jobs oftentimes. So you spend a good amount of time with your grandma, with your Ita, and she's just somebody says that you are her sombra, which is so cool, right? You're her shadow, and you really were, right? I mean, you were in the bars, wherever she would go, church, um, and so that we get you talking about how important the word prieta is to you because that was her term of affection and endearment for you. You write about how you'd be crying at school, you were worried about your mom. What was it that your mom was doing that was maybe dangerous?
So well, at the time I knew what my mom was doing. I knew that my mom worked at the bridge, right? And now it's called CBP, but at that point it was still just customs because customs and border patrol were separate
Uh-huh.
entities. They were cousins. So I knew my mom worked at the bridge as a kid, but I didn't really know what that meant
Yeah.
until I saw like there was a seizure of some, I don't know if it was drugs. I don't know what kind of drugs. But then I saw like these men wearing the same uniform that my mom wore every day. And then it kind of like clicked, like, oh, wait a minute. And it was weird to me, like these big men were doing the same job my little mom was
Hmm.
doing. Because my
Hmm.
mom was very petite, like 5'4",
Mm-hmm.
putting on, her belt and her all this stuff. It was like armor essentially. So it just started to sink into me, like she could really get hurt. But it's weird, and I guess maybe it was the Catholic in me, or I was already
Hmm.
superstitious. Like I felt if I said it out loud, then it would happen.
Yes.
And so I just kind of hung on to it.
Uh-huh. Man, that is a Catholic thing. I used to do the other way around where I felt like if I said something, like if I jumped on a crack or something like that 4 times, then something I wanted to happen would, but if I did it 3 times, it wouldn't. Oh man, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.